Welcome back everyone to the Frostpunk lore series, where in today's episode, we will discuss the new home scenario. This video will be divided up into two sections, the first being all in-game / developer confirmed information, and the second being my own theories as to where the world and story may go in the future.
The still, cold world. No horizon in sight. The rulers of old, stripped of pride and glory. It feels as yesterday we were turning the wheels of progress. Until the frost stopped it all. Suddenly, without a warning. When tides had changed, they changed for all of us, no matter wealth or class. We've lost our world to snow, and with it, our last traces of humanity. We bid farewell to plenty, and for those who remained came the time to adapt. We decided to leave our homes and head north. We roamed for weeks, maybe months, leaving behind all the things we once believed had made us. It was hope pushed us forward, slowly, step by step. We knew the cost of our journey, and we paid the price 100 times. Finally, the time has come to build the last city on Earth.
Fleeing London and crossing the sea to reach the frozen north, many within the convoy were separated after being hit by an unexpected blizzard. A handful of survivors managed to reach the site of a generator they dubbed New London, only to find it frozen solid and abandoned. They are left with questions like, why is no one here? Did any of their people survive? And is anyone else out there? This scenario is the base game of Frostpunk, the main campaign, if you will. During this scenario, we must protect our people from the cold and themselves. Much like all the other scenarios in Frostpunk, not much happens in the city during these early days, so let's explore the Frostlands first. Reaching an observatory, our scouts discover a report from the scientists stationed there that claim that the sun is dimming. In their notes, they wrote, "The loss of sunlight can't be explained solely by the fouling of the atmosphere by the southern volcanoes. The sun is dimming." Now, this is not the first time we've heard theories about why the Great Freeze happened. Some people claim the sun dimming is the cause of the temperature drops, some claim it's from a massive volcanic eruption, specifically Krakatoa, and some claim it's from a meteor. As later in this scenario, we find a massive hole in the ice where we can find multiple dead bodies and a testimony of the extensive research dedicated to the fluctuations of the Earth's magnetic field. At the end of the day, we just don't know. As I've said multiple times during this series, the developers said that the world fell to a single global minimum, meaning it's the same temperature in the north as it is on the equator. So the sun dimming wouldn't make sense, as there would still be varying temperatures around different parts of the world. The same thing goes with a meteor or a volcano. Yeah, that might make the world colder or cause a small ice age, but that wouldn't cause this paradoxical weather phenomenon. But this does give us insight into how the survivors of the Great Freeze were trying to make sense of everything when everything stopped making sense. Continuing on our exploration, we find some more signs of life. specifically from a shelter with a note left behind that reads, "To all scientists, if you use any supplies, remember to notify the quartermaster upon your return to the city." Nearby, there's a signpost that points in two directions and reads, "London, 1,934 miles, and home, 27 miles. Following this trail to home, we find an abandoned weather station with a scientist's note predicting that the Great Freeze is going to get much, much worse. Despite this ominous forecast, from the station, our scouts can see the city of Winterhome off in the distance. And eventually reaching the city, we see all that remains. The streets are littered with scores of dead bodies. The City Chronicle describes the shortage of food and the citizens' increased despair, the following squabbles, riots, and descent into anarchy, fights for dwindling resources, and the eventual starvation. The last entry in the Chronicle reads, "God forgive us, we are eating our dead. There is no hope." Now, we already know what happened to Winterhome. Go check out my video on the subject if you haven't already. Long story short, after the starving city fell into chaos, its leader, an army captain, appointed himself as absolute ruler. He tried to impose order using force, which resulted in many people dying. This caused a small civil war to break out that ended in the rebels succeeding in overthrowing the tyrant, placing a new captain in charge of Winterhome in order to save the city. However, due to the rush job and stolen parts needed to complete and maintain Generator 157, it eventually caused the generator to fail and self-destruct. Repurposing a partially working dreadnought, some of Winterhome's inhabitants managed to escape into the Frostlands to parts unknown, while canonically, many were left behind to either die in the ensuing generator explosion or the resulting chaos of those who managed to survive the blast. As we learned, some of those left behind resulted to cannibalism in a futile attempt to survive. As the news of Winterhome's destruction reaches back to New London, our people begin to panic, thinking that it's all pointless and that they should all go back to Old London, where it's quote-unquote safer. This causes a division in New London, where they must choose a path in order to maintain peace, a path of order and discipline, or a path of faith and spiritual strength. We don't know what New London chose, and for the purposes of this video, it doesn't really matter. But as tensions begin to grow, a choice had to be made. Back out in the wastes, while our people squabble amongst themselves, our scouts discover something else unusual: actual survivors from Winterhome. Near a freshwater spring, our scouts find some refugees from Winterhome. But they're not the only ones. Not too far away, our scouts discover a hideout full of kids. They tell our scouts that one night their teachers and some hunters took them out of Winterhome for a secret adventure and left them in a cave to get some food from Winterhome, but never came back. As far as we know, these are the only survivors of Winterhome. Elsewhere, we can find a camp of Americans that was well supplied in everything except food. Searching their tents, our scouts find their bodies, most of them being badly worn but having strangely sophisticated artificial limbs bearing a company's symbol: Tesla Manufacturing. Finding an exile colony, we find more Americans barely clinging to life, one of which held a diary that read, "Exiled from Tesla City. With food and fuel running out, we sent the strongest among us to search for help. They are our last hope." Our scouts believe that the camp of dead Americans were those they sent for help. Not too far away, we find the center of a settlement that is marked with an upright boulder where someone chiseled, "May God forgive the genius who sacrificed human lives in the name of progress. For we can't, exiles of Tesla City." Nearby, our scouts discover a piece of hull bolted to a boiler that's engraved with, "In the year 1886, the American expedition aboard Hephaestus landed here in search of a haven from the global glaciation. May God preserve the souls of our fellow countrymen who perished on the way aboard our sister ship, Prometheus." Continuing on our way to this elusive Tesla City, we discover the American dreadnought known as Hephaestus that somehow managed to crush and sweep aside thick slabs of ice with ease, much more efficiently than the British dreadnoughts. Nearby, we can find the remains of its sister ship, Prometheus, where we can find a log with Tesla's last orders: "Transfer all supplies and able-bodied survivors aboard Hephaestus. Take the amputees only if you have prosthesis to make them useful." Finding a fishing village that used to supply Tesla City with food, we uncover a letter that reads, "Mike, don't return to the city. Tesla is a madman. He cast out all the amputees, all the sick. Jerry's parents and old Beth are among them. There will be blood, that's for sure. And soon." And then we find it. Tesla City in all its bloody glory. A slogan hangs over the entrance that reads, "Able minds and bodies will prevail over the cold." A central tall tower shines with the blue glow of electric discharge, which forms a protective dome over the city. But things aren't quite right, as there are charred bodies laying in the streets and the scent of burned flesh hangs in the air. As our scouts look on, they see lightning streaks from the tower hitting a building and leaving a gash in the roof. Not wanting to join the charred inhabitants of Tesla City, our scouts search the outskirts and discover no living soul inside. Leaving the grave of the city, our scouts find another research station that has been ransacked, with an audio diary from Nikola Tesla himself saying, "All the observed changes, like the sun dimming, volcanic ash could not have caused such a cooling." But what if the huge quake of 1887 in Patagonia was an asteroid strike? The audio recording is suddenly cut off as all we can hear is shouting, crashes, and then silence. Following the tracks leading away from the research station, we find another group of Americans who nearly shoot our scouts, but we are able to talk them down and escort them to our city. Before we leave, they tell us that they dealt justice to Tesla after expelling him from his city and buried his body in a nearby cave. And on that cheery note, let's go back to our city, where those who wanted to leave New London for Old London have given up their crusade and decided to stay. Just in time too, as refugees from seemingly out of nowhere just start showing up. They keep saying doom is coming, and eventually another wave of refugees arrive and tell us that some kind of enormous weather anomaly is on its way. They all seem to be from a group led by someone they call Polar Explorer Nansen, who led them north. Now, unpronounceable first name Nansen was a real person who was an explorer, scientist, diplomat, and humanitarian who made the first crossing of the Greenland interior in 1888, among other achievements. So it makes total sense that in this world, he would be able to lead a massive group of survivors in this inhospitable waste. However, as the last wave of refugees come in, Nansen isn't among them. As they tell us, many stayed behind who were too ill to travel, Nansen among them. And as the final refugee wave comes in, we finally see it. The Great Storm, a massive weather phenomenon with deadly winds and lethal cold. This storm will decide the ultimate fate of New London. Our scouts quickly scour what's left of the Frostlands, finding any and all refugees and resources that they can. Mass panic sweeps the New London streets as food theft causes riots, doomsayers cause discontent, and general hopelessness causes society to break down. Then the storm hits. It's deadly, and it lasts for 1 week, putting New London's infrastructure to the test. But eventually, the storm dies down, and the survivors stand triumphantly, having hopefully survived the worst as they slowly begin to accept the reality of their new lives. And with that is all the important lore for this scenario, so let's talk about a few things. So the main thing I want to talk about is Tesla City. This city is extremely fascinating. The whole thing is a ghost town, driven to an unceremonious end by a man who looked at people as if they were numbers on a spreadsheet. Tesla didn't care for his citizens and treated them like machines, only caring about their efficiency. Because of this, it caused mass upheaval, and presumably a riot formed that resulted in them taking control of the city and potentially damaging whatever that tower was in the center of the city. If I were to make an assumption, I'd wager that the tower was an electric version of a steam core generator. The real Nikola Tesla was a renowned Serbian-American inventor, electrical engineer, and mechanical engineer who made significant contributions to the development of modern electrical systems and technologies. So one can assume much of the city was not steam core powered, like the Brits have been using, but instead it's good old-fashioned American electricity. So for simplicity's sake, let's just call that tower the Tesla Tower, and I assume once this Tesla Tower was damaged, it went haywire and fried everybody. Maybe its original purpose was to create this shield over the city to prevent the snow from seeping in, and maybe for a time it actually worked. But as we know, Tesla was a horrible leader, and all the horrendous decisions he made caused everything to crumble. Those outside the city during the riots were safe from the chaos, but were unable to return to the city and take any supplies they left behind for fear of vaporization. This is why most of the survivors were Tesla City exiles. What I find fascinating about Tesla City is that, theoretically, it's a goldmine of technology. We already saw strangely sophisticated artificial limbs on some of the dead Americans, and the dreadnought they arrived in was far more advanced than the ones the English had. So within this dead, impenetrable city, there may be dozens of technological wonders just buried underneath the snow. While yes, if we attempt to send our scouts into the city, there's a 50-50 chance that they either die or shut down the electric field. If they do shut it down, then we can just set up an outpost and send steam cores back to New London. I think, canonically speaking, this didn't happen, and only serves gameplay purposes rather than actual events that occurred in the canonical Frostpunk timeline. Mostly because I strongly believe this city would have far more than just steam cores laying around. If Tesla was so horrible to his people and only cared about efficiency, then I assume he probably rushed many of his inventions into production, with little to no regard for human life. And some of those inventions were probably insane. Just to give you an idea of what Tesla's real theoretical inventions were, Tesla reportedly worked on a particle beam weapon that he claimed could be used for defensive purposes that he called the Teleforce, or the Death Ray. Tesla also claimed to have built a small mechanical oscillator that, when attached to a structure, could produce enough vibrations to bring it down or have the potential to split the Earth in half, granting it the nickname the Earthquake Machine. So to say Tesla had some imaginative inventions would be an understatement. Tesla also was the first person to use radio waves to remote control a toy boat, which he considered to be the beginning of robotic technology. So in a world where automatons already exist, perhaps Tesla has some schematics for highly advanced machines that he never put into full production. So I think it's totally within the realm of possibility to say that Tesla, with no financial or moral limitations, would create some crazy inventions. So maybe he did make a death ray or an earthquake machine. Maybe he did create advanced automatons, and maybe he made much, much more. However, all that technology, all that advancement is currently locked away, lost to time, buried underneath a shield of electricity and snow.